Good morning, everybody. It's Tim Golding, State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in Michigan, and we are joined by Representative Christian Grant, and Tim Creech, Realtor, is back with us again. We're talking about housing and zoning reforms and a much-needed fix to our broken housing system in Michigan. And Rep. Grant, along with Rep. Aragon, have really been spearheading these 9 bills that are working their way through the system. And we are going to get your point of view on that today and talk about, if you could start out a little bit of the history, how we got to where we're at with the bills, groups that you've worked with to try to make these bills a reality, and what your overall thought is, and we'll dig into some of the nitty-gritty after that.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me. I am Representative Grant. I have the honor of representing main portion of Grand Rapids and a small part of Wyoming, Michigan. And I came from 6 years serving on the Grand Rapids Public School Board. And when I thought about how could I best serve my constituents when I came to the Capitol, it was really to allow them to have economic opportunity and to do economic development that felt very local, in a sense that it raised the quality of life for the people we serve. And housing was the first thing on my mind. I've always been taught that the best investment that you can make is home ownership. And as a small business owner, sometimes that was the only access to capital that I had. And so my dad is like, you don't benefit from home ownership. The benefit comes in the purchase, right? You make a good, strong decision in the purchase. You buy a good property, and for the rest of your life, you that can change your life.
Sure.
And so when I look at the housing market today, people don't have an opportunity. I've heard so many people say, homeownership isn't an investment. Stop saying that. And I'm like, well, maybe today that is true. But for previous generations, almost every generation of Americans before us, home ownership may be the only investment that some families made, but it still repaid them in dividends, right?
Right.
During COVID, when I couldn't do construction in real estate, I sat at the table and helped many families close on mortgages on their homes. I saw families pull out money at a very reasonable interest rate to send their kids to college, to make gifts to their kids who were getting married or who were purchasing their first homes. Home ownership can be an investment if we provide the market for that to happen. And right now, the market just isn't there. So that is why my work is focused on housing. And when we started doing research, I had 2 questions. What is raising the cost of construction and building homes the most? And what is delaying the process of building homes the most? And we came to zoning. Now, mind you, zoning is not the silver bullet. It's not going to just change the world overnight, but we should be doing the things that are having the most impact. We should start with those and then work our way down the list.
Sure, absolutely.
And so we came to zoning partially not because zoning is evil, and this package does not remove zoning at all. There are 9 bills and 8 concepts. 5 of those bills focus directly on very specific zoning areas. This does not eliminate zoning across the board, but very specifically, it looks at what are the things that have the most impact on housing and the availability of housing and the cost of housing. They're very narrow in scope, right? And then there are 2 other bills that talk about the process. How can we streamline a process, make it very clear and transparent across the state so people don't have to guess or, ask questions about how does this work? How do I know if the answer is yes or no? But it's very clear and it's very outlined. And that's what this package does, and I think it's really important for us to clarify that for people who think we may be trying to eliminate zoning overall.
Yeah, when you did your initial research, did you look at other states? Because I think Texas, Florida, Montana maybe have passed similar laws, and they're seeing good results. And how long have you been working on this? Mm-hmm. I think some other reps years ago tried to get some stuff done and it just didn't fail, but now we're getting some real traction.
Yeah, so I'm 3.5 years into the job, and so that is exactly how long I have been working on this. I started by just doing the research of who is doing housing work, who are they? what bills have been introduced in the past. So I came across, in my research, that zoning was a thing, and then I came across other people on my side of the aisle and across the aisle who were doing this work. I'm not a fan of reinventing the wheel, so I just immediately reached out to those people and said, can we work together? What have you learned? And immediately they said, yeah, this is gonna like blow up in your face. Like, this is very hard. This is not a concept that is tied to any one party or any one group. And I think I was just naive enough at the time to say, well, like, let's try it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Right. And I think when you, and so the answer is that I have been willing to talk to any and everyone, and that journey has taken me to Utah. I've met with legislators from Montana. I've talked to organizers in Texas. I've gotten feedback from legislation that was introduced in Arizona. We've looked at things from California and New York. The journey has literally taken me all across the country. With meeting with people who we may have very different ideologies on many other things, but we believe that people should have access to housing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Americans for Prosperity is freedom and opportunity, and work every day in every area of government to try to create more opportunity and freedoms for people. And that starts, in my opinion, kind of with housing. People need a place to live. So besides American First Prosperity, and you have bicameral, bipartisan support on these bills, what other groups in this state have you reached out with and been collaborative with, and maybe that are helping champion these bills?
Yeah,
because there's broad support for them.
The list is very long, and we actually sat down and kind of divided the list up. Of course, we have a long list of stakeholders who come from the housing industry. They're housing experts. But then we also have people who are in the environmental industry, right? People who are in the agricultural industry who are saying large lot size requirements and very strict requirements on setbacks and things. Those are pushing homes into our agricultural land, right? Into our farmland, which Michigan, our urban cores can forget. That's some of our main business here, right?
Sure.
We have people in the business sector, so business leaders for Michigan and other people who are saying, we want to bring business opportunities to Michigan, but housing is the first conversation that that comes to the table. Do you have opportunities for housing? And when we see such a decrease in housing production in Michigan, that turns people away, right? Also, people who want to stay in the state, young people, older people. We know that Michigan is infamous for snowbirds, right? But not just because of temperature, but because of the type of housing that we have available. And so if young people and older people are saying, I'd love to stay here, but I'd love to also live in a place that I enjoy, that I'm happy to be in. And if those kind of places are illegal to build currently, they're going to look in other places for those options. But to answer your question, the list of stakeholders is extremely long. We have chambers of commerce all over the state. We have Climate Cabinet for Michigan. We have Zillow. We have Airbnb, Sierra Club, Strong Towns Flint, Yes in My Backyard, Oakland County. Apartment associations, AARP, disability advocates, because we need more accessible housing, MISHDA, Michigan Environmental Council, Michigan Realtors, Home Builders Association of Michigan, Michigan Association of Planners, Housing North. The list goes on, and I'm really proud of this list. Michigan League of Conservation Voters, Area Agency on Aging, West Michigan. This list is so robust, and I think that it just shows that housing is an issue that we all have to be focused on.
It absolutely is, and I've talked to Tim earlier about it, and having my own children trying to buy homes for the first time, and they're unbelievably expensive. The average homeowner is 39 years old, first-time home buyer now. We need to change that. And the list that you just went through of all the coalition partners, I think you can't state that enough, because there is a lot of support behind these bills, but there is opposition, but it's from a small group of people. And I think Do you get in your office calls from constituents complaining or calls from different township organizations that are complaining? Who's complaining the most? Who's yelling the loudest?
You know what? I should give a real shout out to my team because they are fielding those calls. And we have the pleasure of getting calls from all over the state because we are leading on this package.
Right.
But you're right. It is coming from people who are sitting on the planning and zoning boards. But to their credit, the people who are on these boards or on these commissions or, locally elected who are willing to have a conversation, by the time we come out of that conversation, I won't say that they agree, but they have a different perspective of why. And so my real request of everyone all across the state has been, A, reach out to me. Let's talk.
Yeah.
But B, let's talk policy. Let's not just talk about power. Because if your stance is that I am against losing power no matter what, we can't really come to a common ground on that, right? And if we're looking at this from the viewpoint that, yes, people need housing. Yes, I know we need to do something different. But if doing something different means limiting my personal power, then I'm opposed. It doesn't serve the people of Michigan. So the people who have been willing to talk policy, to talk numbers, to talk data. I've had people who say, I'm looking at this. You're starting out with a proposed lot size of 1,500 square feet. My city or township or, wherever we are, we require 22,000 square feet. So that is a very large jump. And the reason why we do that is because of this. And I've had people have this conversation. Now we have a starting point to talk, right? Versus just, you can't tell us what to do.
Yeah, I've fielded a lot of calls for our support of these bills as well from township officials and others. And it's the conversation, we always try to get back to the local control is the property owner. That's the best control of these properties and let people do what they want within reason, not health and safety issues aside, but, not have to get a permission slip from the government to build a 1,000 square foot house because that's what a lot of people can afford and a lot of people want. And in a lot of places in the state, you just can't do that. I'm super excited about these bills. And as a former home builder for 25 years and sitting on the chair of a planning commission currently, I welcome these changes. It will create a lot of opportunity for people and create a lot of less headaches, I think, for townships. Earlier, you and I were talking about a community, I think Muskegon, and some changes that they're making, and they shared with you how that's going to impact them if other communities don't get on board with some of this stuff.
Yeah, so there was actually a local investor from the area, from Muskegon, and we had a conversation. And we do have local communities all over the state who are looking at zoning reform, and they are taking on some measures. And even sometimes those local communities say, I'm doing this already, but I don't want you to tell me to do it. And we know that there are some people who are being really innovative all over the state, and it is appreciated. The reason why we believe these need to be state level changes is because those areas, if they begin to do work that is creating housing and creating walkable communities and creating accessible housing and all of these things, what's going to happen is people from the nearby areas who are refusing to become flexible they're not doing that work. The flexible communities are going to be overwhelmed with people from outside coming in. And it's effectively going to make their market worse versus better. So that's when we hear we're doing these things and our market got worse. Our pricing went up, right? And so they're like, you're saying that it works, but it doesn't. Well, no, what happened is people who couldn't afford to live in the surrounding areas brought their dollars. And if we use Muskegon as an example, right, we already know Muskegon is a beautiful community on the lakeshore. It's honestly one of my favorite places. So we already know that people from around the country are seeing our lakeshore and are coming. They're overwhelming the market. But if Grand Haven and Norton Shores and Holland aren't saying like, okay, let's find housing for the people who are here, those locals start coming to Muskegon. Now Muskegon people are being pushed out, right? So this only works when everyone is taking a look at their market and everyone is providing different types of housing and different options for the people who live there.
Yeah, Americans, we tend to flock towards freedoms and opportunities, and one community creates it, people are going to go there and take advantage of it, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and then sometimes once we get there, we don't want the door open for others, and
Exactly.
I think we have to, really look at what that means. I think something else important about this package is it's really been marked as just radical, right? I read an article or a post the other day that informed me I was a communist because of this work, which with the coalition of people that we have here, I actually think is interesting. But how do we have to right size this conversation to not feel so radical and outside the box is 50 or 60 years ago, our grandparents actually lived in housing markets just like this. So these are new. Like, this zoning reform has just over time become more and more and more restrictive. Mm-hmm. But if we look at some of our most sought after communities around the state, they were built before these large lot size requirements and before the setbacks. So when we go to our most walkable communities, I have Heritage Hill in Grand Rapids, there's parts of Ann Arbor, there's Birmingham, there are neighborhoods in Detroit. Somehow those communities have figured out how very wealthy people can also live next to college students, who can also live next to middle-class families who are up and coming. When we have communities where people, I don't want to say they don't choose to live there, but there are parts of my district where people live, but as soon as they get the job or as soon as they're married to the person, there's no place for them to go in that neighborhood. They have to go outside. And I think that that's so detrimental to a community, because sometimes we're losing our best and brightest, not because they want to leave the place where they've grown and developed, but there's just no place for them to grow. When we start doing housing and community development in a way that serves phases of people's life, like I started here, then we married and raised our kids here, then we retired, that community benefits so much from having the full growth of that individual there. Absolutely.
There's nothing new under the sun, and to your point, if those communities were destroyed, as Tim and I were talking earlier, you couldn't rebuild them today. And I worked for 20 plus years in downtown Ann Arbor, remodeling and rehabbing and building homes and stuff. And they're beautiful places, and there's a lot of opportunity. And to your point, there are dorms or frat houses or whatever, all these different communities spread around, and people are living well together, but you couldn't build those today. And that's a problem. A lot of the vacant lots in Detroit can't be built as they are now because of zoning.
Right.
So it's not a new radical idea. And Tim, you probably deal with this. Final thoughts from you on these zoning changes?
Definitely. I am so really excited about every single thing I've heard you say today. When we look at some of the housing projects that came in after World War II, like I lived a lot of my life in Adrian, and there was some fantastic homes there that were duplexes, and they're just row after row right after World War II that were built, but they're all really small. But all kinds of families, successful families, and by successful I don't mean monetarily speaking, but I mean loving, caring families were living in those, and it's still an area that people seek out right now.
Sure.
And they didn't have huge yards, they didn't have some minimum of 1,000 square feet plus. They were smaller homes, and we don't have those opportunities, and people need to have a good, safe place. When we have unaffordable housing, it forces people into apartments oftentimes, which doesn't give them the chance to build that equity, doesn't give them a chance to have economic opportunities. And even then, if they can find an apartment, most of the time they have to commute a long distance. And this is just great, solid reform. It is so welcome to hear that you're doing that work. And I'm so supportive of what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, when I bought my home, I was 25. And my dad is like, who's going to cut the grass? Who's going to, right? I'm like, you, of course. But,
Hey,
thanks, Dad, for all the grass cuts. I appreciate it. But what I realized at that time is I was paying $800 for rent. And I had gotten a notice that said the rent's going to go up. My lease wasn't up yet. But when I started, going online and using the mortgage calculator, I'm like, my mortgage is going to be more affordable than my rent.
Yep. Yep.
Everyone's not in that place now, but that's in 2012, that's where we were. And so, but my dad's like, you got down payment, you got this, you got that. So I said, great, I'm going to break my lease and I'm going to move in with you for 6 months and I'll save up and I'll go. But that was 25. So I've had time to build equity. I've pulled equity multiple times. I've put large payments back in, and the market has grown with me. Mm-hmm. If I would have purchased that home at 40, I wouldn't have had time to build that equity and to retire. So the people that I was sitting at tables with had been in their homes for years. And when they got to that retirement age, that's when it could pay them back. But if we're setting people up to get their first home at 40 or 45, first of all, when can they retire? Because they haven't paid the mortgage down. But when will they be able to provide for the next generation? The next generation is going to be paying that mortgage for them. Sure. And so we have a system that's gone upside down.
Yes.
The lack of housing availability is forcing the prices up to, this home isn't really worth that much, but the market has just forced those numbers. We have to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Yep.
1 minute left. What are your final thoughts you want people to know about this? And we'll probably come back and have more conversations, but for today, what's your final thoughts?
My final thought is that housing is the most important thing that people should have access to. Everyone doesn't want to own, but they should have the option to own if they do. My other thought is, if not this, what? Because we haven't seen viable other options, and also that it's work from all of us, constituents, builders, environment, everyone. So the table is open for more people to come and have conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys, for coming in. Look forward to more conversations in the future.
Thank you.
Awesome.